long. I'd like to read, first of all, Matthew's Gospel, chapter 11, and around about verse 28, I think is what I want. And I'm kind of spoiled. I got used to having it up there. I just turn around and read it. But I can do it the old-fashioned way. Okay, this is a familiar passage, especially for me. I use it a lot and read it a lot. And it's Jesus talking in verse 28, Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. He says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Then he says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy, my burden is light." Now, in the beginning of this little passage, he gives an invitation, or a direction, if you want to call it that. He says, "Come to me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." So the first thing he says, for those whoever, I think he's just speaking in general to anyone, come to me. And that's the first thing we do as Christians. That's the beginning of a Christian life. We just come to him. It's not, it doesn't start with trying to reform yourself or make yourself better. He just says, "Come to me and I will give you rest." It's just the opposite of what a lot of people think. It's all about self-improvement and making myself better. He says, "Come to me, I'll give you rest." And the reason he says, "I'll give you rest," is when we come to him, he takes upon himself the responsibility of doing the work in our lives that we can't do for ourselves. But then, notice that in verse 28, he says, "Come to me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, I'll give you rest." First thing he says, "Come to me." Then he gives another direction, verse 29. And I think he's speaking to those who have come to him. Verse 29, he says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn of me." That's the second thing. So first of all, we come to him, but then he says, "Take my yoke upon you." And I think that's meaning, a yoke meaning the kind of thing that hooks two animals together when they do field work, like it goes across their neck, a little wooden bar kind of a thing. Another way to say it is, in common American slang, get hooked up with me. Come into a relationship with me. Be hooked up with me, he's saying. And once we're connected to him, by coming to him, then the next thing he says is, "Learn of me." So that's what we do as Christians. We, in the process of our Christian life, we learn from him and about him. First thing he says is, "I am meek and lowly in heart," which the first thing he tells us that we learn about him is that he's not a tyrant, and that he's not mean, and that he's not bossy and forceful and rude, but he is meek, he says, and lowly in heart. That means humble. And he says, again, you'll find rest for your souls, which these are all very beautiful things that he says. But what I wanted to extract from this today and focus on is the fact that there's two parts to it. We come to him, but then what we do then is learn something. He wants us to learn something. Well, so the first question that occurs to me when I observe that is, what is it that he wants us to learn from him? That would be good to know what it is that after coming to him, what does he want us to learn from him? And there's another passage that speaks to that, and I'd like to look at that briefly, and that's in John's Gospel. That's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So John's Gospel, chapter 8, we have a similar two-stage situation here, and he talks about learning from him, and he gives us a little more information about what it is that we learn from him once we come to him. In John's Gospel, chapter 8, again, these are very familiar passages, or words. Verse 30 says this, John's Gospel, chapter 8, verse 30. Jesus is doing the talking. He said, as he spoke these words, many believed on him. So that's the first thing. I equate that with when he said, come to me, believing him. So many believed on him. That is to say, many of those that were hearing him believed. So then he begins to say to those that believe on him, verse 31, then said Jesus to those Jews that believed on him, if you continue in my word, then you are my disciples indeed, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Now to me, this sounds a lot like when he said, come to me, and then now for those who come to me, he says, take my yoke upon you and learn of me. Very similar idea here. He says, continue in my word, and you will be my disciples. And he says, if you continue in my word, he says, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So first of all, I notice that the end result of learning from him and finding out what he wants us to find out, learning the truth, is to be free. He wants us to be free. And you might think, what does it mean to be free? Well, I think what it means to be free is that you're not like a servant or a slave, or not taking orders or directions. You do your own thinking, make your own decisions. That's what it means. I think his goal for us is that we don't have to have somebody tell us what to do, but we have enough that we've learned from him in here that we can be led by our own conscience and our own, that we don't have to have somebody telling us all the time what to do, that we can decide for ourselves according to our own conscience, to be led by our own conscience, to do what we do because we choose to do it, not because somebody's threatening us, not because we're in fear of what would happen if we don't do something, but we do it because we want to do it. We do what we do because it's right, because our own conscience. And we learn that from him. So he says, I like to say this another way. He says, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. So the goal is to be free. He says you shall know the truth. I like to say it this way, you find out what's true. That's another way of saying it. I think the same thing, but I like to say it that way. You find out what's really true. And what that implies, either way you take it, when he says you shall know the truth, or as I just suggested, you'll find out what's really true. What that implies is that you don't necessarily know what's true to begin with. That from our relationship with him, we gain insight into a truth that we might not have perceived before. We find out something that is true that we might not have realized that was true. And that's a distinct possibility. Now, again, he's talking to those that believe on him. So it makes me think, it makes the thought run through my mind that it's possible to be a Christian, it's possible to believe in him and not really know what's really true. And if you think about it, there's a lot of Christians who maybe don't understand what's really true about things. That's why there are differences of opinion, differences of ideas, and that's why people have all kinds of notions about God that might not necessarily be true. Differences of, hi Wilma, hi Dana. So, you shall know the truth. You shall find, he says, continue in my word. Again, very much like what he said, take my yoke upon you and learn of me. We learn from him, and the end result is to be free and find out what's really true. So finding out what's true, he says, will lead us to be free. Well, now, the people that were listening when he first said this in verse 33, they got offended about it, evidently. And they said they didn't have such a positive feeling about it as you can see that I have when I read it. They were offended. They said, we be Abraham's seed, verse 33, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, you shall be made free? By the way, Phil is watching the kids today. That's why the words aren't up on the screen there. I didn't want you to think it was just you not seeing it. Phil is watching. April's gone to Tulsa. Anton's getting an award, so she went over to see that. And so Phil's watching the kids. And so we're doing it the old-fashioned way, with just without the computer. And again, anybody that wants to, go try back there and try to figure it out. You're welcome to go do it. Anyway, we're reading from John's Gospel, chapter 8. And we saw that as Jesus spoke, many believed on him, and he said, continue in my word, and you'll find out what's really true, or you'll learn the truth, or know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So then they said, well, what do you mean? That's their response. We be Abraham's seed, and we're never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, you shall be free? So he offended their pride a little bit. Why, we're the children of Abraham. We're not in bondage. Why do you come along here saying that? See, what he's implying is you need to find out the truth from him to be free. And they're saying, well, we're not in bondage. So he explains, verse 34. Verily, verily, I say unto you, whosoever committeth sin is the servant of sin. And now he makes it a little more plain about the bondage that he's talking about. Now, some people take this verse 34 that I just read, and take it out of its setting, out of the sequence of logical discourse and talking into which it falls, and make it say something that it doesn't say. Let me read it again. Verily, verily, I say to you, whosoever commits sin is the servant of sin. And sometimes, like preachers are bad about this, to try to scare people into good behavior. So you better not commit a sin, because if you do anything wrong, if you commit a sin, then now you won't be saved anymore, you won't be a Christian. Now you're the servant of sin. No, he's not saying that at all. What he's saying is, I want to make you free,